Okay, so welcome, Stian Nicolaysen. You're an integral coach, you're a therapist and practitioner. You're based in Norway, where you operate a holistic health clinic. And you also host, together with Frank Nilsen, the Two Vikings podcast. And in addition, you're an accomplished bodybuilder. So my first question to you is, can you start by sharing with us the journey of growth and development that you experienced, which led you to become a therapist and coach?
Well, thank you for that introduction. Yes. I guess everything started when I grew up in a family that was very much split. So I had parents who got divorced when I was very young, stepmother, stepdad come in, then my mom and dad got together again, and then they split up again and new. So I grew up in a very unstable environment for that reason. And also, my mom had cancer on several occasions all through my childhood and my teenage years. So I think that, and also as you and I know, I'm an Enneagram 3. So I'm not quite sure what came first, kind of like the chicken or the egg, but I had always a very specific need to be valued by other people. So I grew up. I'm born in '81, so I grew up with He-Man and World Wrestling Federation and Arnold and Sylvester Stallone. So I went straight to admiring these people that had that American success, the big muscles, the martial arts. So I just fell in love with that stuff from a very, very young age. And that's kind of like been a red line, a red thread all through my life. So I started with martial arts at 12 years old. I started weightlifting when I was 14 years old, my bodybuilding. And I love that because that I did get that external praise, reward, that admiration, right? That I had kind of like been looking for because I didn't have that when I was young. So that was my inspiration, and we're going to talk about that, I guess, a little bit later on with values. That was my driving inspiration. But in hindsight, I was very lucky because when I was 17 years old, I got chronic fatigue syndrome. Now, that was horrible because that was something that I had for 10 years. But I would never have been the man that I am today if it wasn't for that I actually was suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome for that many years. Now, I kept on pushing. I pushed because I wanted to be this muscular martial arts, guy that, as I said, had that external success. And the more I pushed, the more I had to learn. So I read everything that I could about bodybuilding, hypertrophy, nutrition. But when I started to get more and more and more chronically fatigued, I like I say I always kid around with this. Like I say, I'm really stupid because it actually took me 9 years before I actually understood that, okay, you cannot do this to yourself any longer. You gotta stop. This is obviously life trying to teach you something, and you gotta basically start to go within. And that's what I did. But it almost killed me. I was so severely fatigued that I was just lying. I lost everything that I had, money wise, everything. I had spent everything on doctors and therapists, and I had to actually move back home in my mother's apartment. And I was just lying there in the darkness for 3 months and listening to audio tapes about meditation and spirituality. And that was a realization. I understood that, okay, I have been searching from the outside and in, but you can actually get to a point where you can actually love yourself from the inside. And obviously, everything didn't resolve itself just by going and listening to Eckhart Tolle and doing meditation. but it was a huge start. And that led me into going from the high protein diet to more raw food. So I was a vegetarian for a couple of years. And basically, when I was getting just a little bit better when it came to energy, I started doing Tai Chi, Qigong, slow, very slow yoga, different breathing exercises. And I built my energy up. And when I did, I started, I had right before I hit rock bottom, I had gone from the personal training aspect and nutrition aspect, training people, other people than myself also, to becoming a neuromuscular therapist and a neuromuscular acupuncture. So, because I also had a lot of pains because I started training, working out at a very, early age. So it went from the bodybuilding to becoming a therapist to becoming very, very fatigued. I had to let everything go. Then, as I said, I had to go more within, building myself up. I also started a 5-year education with a person called Paul Chek. I became what's called a Chek practitioner. And that's a very holistic system. You work with, the body, mind, even the soul aspect. And basically, only 1.5 years after I really started this inner journey, I started my clinic up again. But now it was obviously more holistic. So I always say that I've basically taken all my problems, I've basically solved them myself, and then I've helped other people solving the same problems. And I guess the last part of that is when 1.5 years after like I said, I beat my chronic fatigue, I started my clinic, and I had one very, very dear friend of me. He took his life. And only a few months later, my mother passed away. Not from cancer that she had been struggling with, but she died in a very tragic car accident. And that really shifted everything for me. So once again, I started diving even deeper into psychology and spirituality. So I went down to the Amazon and I stayed there for a couple of months with an indigenous tribe, and I meditated and I did a lot of what's called ayahuasca and the San Pedro, and I worked with that, and I had a lot of spiritual experiences. And when I came back, I started what's called the NLP, neuro linguistic programming, which is a coaching. Yeah, we could talk more about that later. A very, very, very efficient coaching system. And yeah, and that's basically I've taken everything that I've learned from that and all the books that I've read, and I've built up what's called the Nicolaysen method, which is a holistic concept or a holistic method, a system to basically help people with mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual issues that they have been suffering or struggling with.
Wow, that's a beautiful introduction of basically your life story and the ways that you've generated your own suffering, as human beings mainly do, of course, and also how you've embraced your suffering and faced it and then transformed it and used it to help other people. So
Yeah,
that's a very inspiring story indeed.
thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well,
And
that is you nailed it. That is basically what I do.
yes, and just to give people an idea of the path that you've taken throughout life, I'd like to add some photo material here of you in your prime bodybuilding period, because people who are listening might not be able to visualize the degree to which you sculpted your own body, and it's quite impressive from my perspective.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said, that was a huge void in my life, and that was a very, very high value that I had to build that. I mean, Obviously, values are very subjective from person to person. Something that's horrible for someone is beautiful and lovely for another person. I had kind of like a vision of what I would love to kind of like build up and look like. And yeah, so I set that as my mission in my early years.
Yes, and you succeeded. And it's interesting because I also recently watched a 3-part documentary about Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the story he describes about how he approached the bodybuilding path that he took. It has many similarities with what you're describing also. So, but I think you've touched on a number of really interesting things that we can go deeper on. And one of the main things indeed is what you just discussed about values. And I know that you work a lot with your clients focused around values and purpose. And I've heard you say previously that to be the best version of ourselves, we need to act in ways that reflect our most important values. And you also say that our values are derived from the voids that we experience in life. Can
Yeah.
you say more about your view and perhaps describe a practice that people can do themselves around values?
Yeah, very well encapsulated. From everything that I've read and studied when it comes to personal development, psychology, and growing up, it seems to me like values are one of the most important components. And I'm not talking about religious values here, cultural values, not values from the, your mother and father and preacher and teacher, like what Freud would call the super ego. That's kind of like imposed on you, outer authorities telling you that you should value that, you should value this. No, I'm talking about what your life actually demonstrates, what it actually demonstrates. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what makes values so important is that you actually experience your life through your own filter of your subjectively unique values. So if something is important to you, you will spot it, you will remember it, and you will basically delete things that are lower on your values. That's not important to you. In NLP, we say that we delete and we distort our reality according to our values. So, anyway, your highest value, your very, very highest value, that's what you naturally love to do. So that's what I always ask my clients. I'm like, what is it that you actually love to do? Not what you tell yourself that you should do or ought to do or gotta do or need to do, which is basically just imperative language. Again, that's the super ego telling you what you should do. But what is it that you naturally, spontaneously just do that no one ever has to remind you of doing? For me personally, that's this stuff. When I had what's called a Bali belly when I did a workshop down in Bali, and I was so sick. I couldn't do anything without either puking or it going out the other way. But I was still listening to. Actually, I was listening to Ken Wilber, Cosmic Consciousness, because it's such a high value. I love this. I love listening to psychology and spirituality. So it doesn't matter how bad I feel. That's my highest value. And the interesting thing is that your highest value is, like I said, that's basically that comes from your void. So if it's something that you feel that's missing in your life, you would like to import it and fulfill that void. So the bigger the void, the higher the value. A great example, like I said, when I felt scrawny when I was young, and I had that, I was just looking at these, I was putting them on the, golden the golden shadow. I was putting these guys up there on a pedestal. And I was like, that's what I need to do. Then I'll be praised. Then I'll be rewarded and accepted and loved, right? So that was a void, and that was the driver behind that value. Now, when I got chronic fatigue syndrome, the values shifted. Like I said, it took many years before I understood it. I should have understood it earlier. But when I got fatigued enough, that became the void. And that void became bigger than looking like Mr. Olympia, right? So that automatically became a higher value. Now, when I understood what I needed to do to fulfill my fatigue, aka build up my energy, then that was fine. Now I know. Then I went on to building my business again. So that, because like I said, I had lost my money, but now I had a lot of new knowledge. So that was a void. I was like, okay, I got to use this, all the new knowledge that I have, and I got to earn some money again. So I started that clinic up again. But then my mom and my best friend passed away. Then I went into a slightly spiritual crisis. And I was like, what's the meaning behind this? I got to dive even deeper. So our voids in life drive, at least in my book, drives our values. And our voids, they seem to change when or if we manage to fulfill that void. And I will give a couple of very concrete questions that the listener can ask themselves to actually find their most important value. And that is, number one, like I said, what is it that you just love to do that no one has to remind you doing? You just do it straight up. Yeah, I mean, you can't wait to do it. Okay? Now, what you should do, write down the first thing, the second thing, and the third thing. Okay? So what is it that I love the most, second most, and third most? Then, what is it that you love to spend your money on? Or is that just money sits loose? Like, is it, for example, online courses? Is it audiobooks? Is it trips? Is it your kids? What is it? When is it that just you just feel like spending? Again, first example, second and third example. Okay. What is it that you love to talk to other people about? Or is it that you like skew the conversation if you feel that you can? Like, again, is it your kids? Is it your sport? Is it movies? Is it personal development? What is it? First thing, second thing, third thing. Now, the next question, a little bit like what you love, but what is it that you love to read about, listen to, or, for example, watch on YouTube? What's the thing that kind of like goes back and back and back and back? What is that? Same things, different things? Write down first, second, and third. Now, what is it that gives you energy? What is it that you can just do for hours and hours and hours? And you could just, like, you almost feel that you have more energy the longer you do it. Like, again, I got to take that example. Like, for me, again, this stuff, I love to learn about it. I can sit, if I didn't have to do anything else, I could fill my whole day with it, right? And to a certain degree, I do it. Anyway, what is it that you keep around you that tells a lot about what you value? What is it that you actually fill your space with? Is it family pictures? Is it wonderful food? Is it the things that I've already mentioned? Is it working out? Like, do you have like training equipment? Do you have like your yoga mat? How do you fill your space? Like, I have a little bit over 1,000 books behind me here in my favorite room. Again, because I love it, right? I fill my space with knowledge. Okay. So those are, they're not all the questions, but these questions will get you very, very, very close to, again, what your life actually demonstrates. And what your life actually demonstrates, that's your highest value, your telos, your Napoleon Hill would call it the definite chief aim. Gary Keller would call it the one thing. It has many names, but that purpose, your purpose, is not something outside of you. It's actually, like I said, what your life demonstrates. Do you have any questions around this?
Well, I was wondering, which martial arts did you do?
Yeah, so I did. First I did kung fu, then I did kickboxing, and then I did shoot fighting, and then yeah, shutu. It's Japanese. It's the, I would say it's the closest you can come to MMA, mixed martial arts, UFC, basically. And then I went into to what we called free fighting back then, which is basically MMA. So I did that up until I was 26. And like I said, I really hit the wall with my chronic fatigue when I was like 28 and a half. And then I was just like, I cannot do this any longer.
It's interesting because recently there have been studies about long COVID where it's become evident that people who exert themselves too much suffer basically a relapse. So they basically experience greater fatigue after exertion. Yeah. And the same goes for chronic fatigue syndrome, indeed, where for some maladies and some disorders and some physical complaints, activity is the perfect way to go. But for others, it's counterproductive. And that is the case, apparently, for both chronic fatigue syndrome and for long COVID patients.
When I work with clients with chronic fatigue, I usually try to, as much as I can, to balance their autonomic nervous system as much as it's possible. So basically, what is it that takes you into fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system? What is it that actually triggers you? Like, is it mental? Is it emotional? Is it physical work? Is it working out too much, right? What is it that pushes you into producing cortisol and adrenaline and ephedrine and all of the catabolic hormones and the red blood cells? And what is it that we can do to kind of skew you a little bit more to the parasympathetic rests and digest side? Could it be maybe going for a quiet walk instead of going out for jogging and doing strenuous exercise? Could it be breathing exercises? Could it be living according to your values? Less stress. Could it be to do some meditation? Something that's more basically yin instead of yang, right? Something that's more anabolic instead of catabolic. So that resonates with me a lot, what you're saying there. I believe you would like to talk to Shadow a little bit.
Please, yeah, take us into Shadow. Yeah.
First, I did obviously the 3-2-1 Shadow module that can seem to kind of like model from Fritz Perls back in the day, and it's a beautiful way of doing shadow work. Beautiful way. But from one of my teachers, DeMartini, I thought he taught me another way of doing it, which I kind of refined and modeled in my own way, which was basically to you can take all the traits. We have over 4,600 human traits. Now, instead of going in hindsight, after you've kind of like reacted, if someone has done something towards you, or maybe they have, like I said, displayed a personality trait, or maybe they didn't do something that you thought that they should have done for you, for example, right? So I always break it down. Shadow, I say, what personality trait is it that you judge someone for? Let's talk about the dark shadow first. So what is it that you judge someone for? And you say, I don't like that, right? I don't have that. Or if it's an action, something that they do, right? Same thing there. I could never do that. Or if someone, like I said, didn't do something that you think or thought that they should do, and you're like, I would have done that, right? So I always break it down to these three specific things. So let's say someone rejects you, right? And you don't like being rejected. Then I always say, okay, so first of all, what's the proof of someone actually rejecting you? What was it? What was it specifically that they did? Because, the mind loves to just make up stories. So I'm like, get specific. How did he or she actually reject you? Right? So I'm like, well, maybe I spoke to this person and he just turned away like I wasn't there. Okay, so now you know. Number two, like, okay, when have you done that exact same thing? When have you rejected someone in that way? And obviously the shadow will say, I've never done that. I could never do that to someone. I would never hurt someone like that. Well, dig a little bit deeper. Dig a little bit deeper. And I always say, like, go back towards, like, really, like, we got to dig here. Like, if you're going to do shadow work, like, think back to kindergarten, think back to elementary school, really go through, like, have you ever rejected someone? And most people are like, well, okay, was this one time? And it's very strange when you start getting examples. It's almost like the mind just like it loosens up, and it's like, oh, it was this time, and actually I've done it. Oh wow, I did it 3 weeks ago. I didn't even recognize that I did. So I always say, stack as many examples as you can come up with, and usually to really own an action, non-action, or a trait, it usually takes between 20 to 50 examples to really own it. If we're going to own it like once and for all, okay? This is basically the first level of shadow. But then I have something that I call situational shadow. What are the positive aspects of being rejected? No, there are no positive things with being rejected. Nah, that's just one side of the equation, isn't it? What did you, so this is the question. So if someone's rude, or if someone rejects you or lashes out at you, what are the benefits? Well, okay, well, I learned something about that person. Maybe, yeah, I actually got to read people a little bit better. Whatever it is, right? You come up. So I always say, and if the benefit question is a little bit hard, then I always ask, what is it that you learned from it? What was the teachings? What was the learnings from you being rejected? And when you kind of get the learning, then it's a little bit easier to get straight to the benefits. So then you stack up, same thing, as many benefits, as many learnings of being rejected as you possibly can. Now you see the magic. You own it. I reject someone, but there are benefits for me being rejected. And I actually did this on my own 12 years ago, because as I said, Enneagram 3, loving praise from the outside. And I was like, but there has to be a drawback to this, right? They're not just like, it's actually, and when I look back at it now, I'm like, it's horrible to do that to yourself, to do that to yourself, right? And I'm like, there are so many drawbacks of actually, getting praise. And there are so many benefits at actually being rejected from time to time. You learn so much about yourself, your mental, emotional, spiritual side, other people's mental, emotional, spiritual sides. It's a blessing. It really is a blessing in disguise. So you own it, you find the benefits, and then last thing you do is you flip it around and you say, and it's almost the same thing, but it's just changing your perception. So you ask, if the person did praise me or take me in and, admired me, did what I was telling myself would be all good, what would the drawback of that be? Right? So if I actually got praised, if I got accepted instead of rejected, what's the drawback of being accepted? Okay. So you own it, find the benefits of rejection, and then you find the drawbacks of being accepted. Now you own the whole shadow. And you see it personally, that you have the traits, you have the actions, you have the non-actions, and you also see what I call, as I said, the situational shadow. You see that every single situation that you will come upon, or that will come upon you, has both positive and negative sides. The quicker you can find a positive to a perceived negative, the more wisdom you have. It's almost like if you have an old wise woman and an old wise man, and you ask them, what is it that you would do differently? If you could ask yourself, or if you could give yourself an advice 50 years ago, and they're like, all the things that that triggered me, that I thought was so important then and there, when I have it in hindsight, it's not really that important. It's almost like you see it like in more objective bird's view. You can actually see it, and it's not so personal any longer. It basically, it had benefits to it. So I say, the quicker you can find the benefit to a perceived negative, the more you will grow, mature without the aging process. And also, this goes for the golden shadow too, right? If you, for example, say, oh, I wish that I would be a multimillionaire. Life would be so great if I could just have the money and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, what's the downsides? Oh, no downsides. Everything would be easier. No. I mean, obviously not. Friends would probably, bug you about lending money. It would be, you would probably disassociate a lot from your friends, because you would have all of this money and they wouldn't, and it could be jealousy and blah, 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 blah. So that's the golden situational shadow. It seems like we do what we do because consciously or subconsciously, it has either a few important enough benefits or many, many, many benefits. So if we grew up in an environment where we felt very poor, where we had a huge void, and earning money became a very, very high value for us, some people are very aware of that, and they just search that, golden goose, multi-millionaire thing out there their whole life. But a lot of people aren't even aware of it. It's almost like it's a shadow, but they always feel poor, and they always it's a very, very strange thing. So I always say, if you have a golden shadow, if you have something that you always have as a driving mechanism, like, ask yourself, what are the drawbacks? What are the drawbacks of that? Of that being famous, having success, being a world famous coach or therapist, wherever it might be, you know? What are the drawbacks? And you can do the same process as you did with the dark shadow. Same process. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And can you say something about I think you mentioned 4,600 traits. Are those descriptors that, for instance, were identified in the Big Five analysis?
Yeah, so basically, if you just go into human traits, it's over 4,600 human traits.
But how do you define the trait? Is that like they did in the Big Five with descriptors in the sense of anything that can be an adjective? So, for instance,
Being good, being bad,
mhm,
being reckless,
mhm.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. No, indeed. So it's probably language based, because I remember that I think within the Big Five they start out with about 120,000 words, and then they remove all the adjectives, and then the ones that can apply to personality, I think, are about around
Oh,
4,600, something like that.
interesting. Interesting. Very
So,
interesting.
you were speaking previously about NLP, and you said it's neuro-linguistic programming.
Yep.
And so, can you sort of say something about this, and also describe the relationship between NLP and integral theory?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So basically, it's a very, very broad field. NLP is it's so, yeah, it's big, but you could kind of sort of break it down to saying that it's all about being able to understand and communicate with yourself better, and also understand and communicate with other people better. So I would say that's probably the underlying thing. Also, it has basically what Dr. Richard Bandler and John Grinder did. They were the inventors of NLP. So they were basically watching these brilliant psychotherapists in the early 70s that got like tremendous results. They got these extremely brilliant results that no one else seemed to basically got or get. And those were quite a few, but primarily it was Fritz Perls, and it was Virginia Satir, a family therapist. So Fritz Perls is the father of Gestalt therapy, and Virginia Satir, she was a family therapist, and you had Milton Erickson, which was a hypnotherapist. So we have what's called meta language, which is very specific language to basically take a person out of trance or a hypnotic state. A lot of people don't know that we are, for the most part, in a sort of a trance state. Now, we have also what's called Milton language, which is basically hypnotherapy. It's to take a person into a hypnotic state, beneficial, positive hypnotic state, and taking them out of the negative trance or the negative hypnotic state that we are in. So I could just make a brief example. Let's say someone says a lot, uses the word I can't. I could never do that. I can't do that. You can work with this on many different levels. For example, do shadow work, right? But you can also use what's called meta language. And that is basically asking, okay, that's very interesting. what would happen if you could? Basically just say that. What would happen if you could? And a person would be, well, and that takes them out of that hypnotic state that maybe they've been in for a year or 10 years or 20 years. So it's basically using language in very, very specific ways to, like I said, I'm sorry that I'm repeating myself quite a lot, but to take them out of their belief trance or into, basically, like I said, a new hypnotic state. And this is based on what I said initially in the interview, that we people, we distort information, and we generalize information, and we delete information. So let's, for example, just one short example is that we generalize, we can see a chair, and we understand that it's a chair. It could be a design chair, and it can be very different, but we're like, that's something to sit on, right? You don't have to like really watch, and you're like, is that a chair? Can I sit on that? No, you generalize. You generalize that. Deletion could be, like I said, according to your values, you just delete information. That's not important to you. And we also distort information. And the distortion part, that is interesting when it comes to using language. So we can distort a situation. Obviously, we do not experience reality totally objectively if you're not at a very, very high level. The higher level you obviously get up to, the more objective and the less subjective we will be. But we're in our story, our ego story. I am Stian. I've been through this and all of that. I can do these things, but I can never do these things, like stuff like that, right? And if we have a lot of stuff that we tell ourselves, I could never get that. I'm not like that. Well, basically, that's a distorted view of reality. So it's super interesting. You can actually just work with language, specific language. And you can say, I can't do that. Then I say, always say, up until now. Up until now, you haven't been able to do it. That doesn't matter. That doesn't say that you can't do it from now on. Up until now, you haven't been able to do that. And they're like, yeah, that's actually true. Just up until now. Well, you didn't have the knowledge. You didn't know how to, you know? So using language to basically break the thought pattern, break the belief system, very, very efficient to do that.
Am I correct in assuming that, according to Suzanne Cook-Reuter, there are levels of ego development, and one of the levels is construct aware, where we become aware of the self being a construct. So basically something that is not as fixed as we might believe it to be at lower levels of ego development. So am I understanding it correctly that what you're doing with NLP is basically viewing the self as a construct and then seeing where you want to perform operations to perhaps change some of the construct?
I like that. I like that breakdown. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's actually, that's a very, very good explanation.
It's interesting to me because within the context of the Enneagram, you were speaking about that you mostly identify as a type 3, and type 3 is seen as the achiever and also as the most adaptable type within the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is, as many people know, a personality type system with 9 types. And the type 3 tends to be extremely good at viewing its own personality as something that it can build and tweak and create to become more effective at achieving particular goals. And that's why the type 3 is seen as the achiever, is they can sculpt themselves to become effective in achieving what they want to achieve most dearly. So it's interesting to me that the approach of NLP sounds to me also like a very type 3 in the Enneagram approach, where it's basically looking at the self as a project that can be optimized.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously it might be that I'm drawn very much towards those models because I am an Enneagram 3. And so, but that's very, very interesting. And also I can come up with a couple of other examples. So I believe that I might be bullshitting now, but I don't think I am. I think Ken said back in the day when Tammy Simons interviewed him that what are kind of like some of the proofs of that someone is or has grown up more, and he said, I believe, the ability to be able to take perspectives, to actually see, to really take perspectives, to really see another person's view map of the world. And that's a huge part of NLP, that the map is not the territory. The map is not the territory. It's a subjective view. And again, they took another model from Fritz Perls. Fritz Perls, he had two things that he did. He had something called the empty chair model, which is basically, in a way, the 3-2-1 model. And he had very specific questions, as I've taken you guys into now. The how to break up, what happened if you did, up until now, the things that I've said. So we have something called perceptual positions in NLP. And that is, for example, let's say you are struggling with your fiance. And you're like, I cannot believe that she's always on my back about this thing, blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, okay, so you basically, you take your point, your perception, your point of view, your position, and you tell all about like how you experience it. Now, we usually do not put too much time and effort into that, because that's usually how most people they see reality from their own view. But then you go into your fiance's position and you sit like them and you act like them and you really take their perspective, their position, and you try to breathe like them and you really imagine, how is this situation for her? Like, how does she actually experience reality, this situation? And you really go into it. Okay. So obviously this is just a very brief example of it. And then you take what's in, at least in Norwegian, it would be called the bird's view, the objective view, where you can like you see, for example, Stian, me, and my fiance sitting, and you're like the all-knowing guru. You're like Dalai Lama looking looking at these, and obviously, and you take yourself through a lot of questions. Like, what's the advice that you would give these two? What is it that she can give to him and he can give to her? How do they express love for each other? What are the needs? What are the desires? What are the values? And and it's a beautiful process. Beautiful process. I use that a lot when I work with relationships. So, and then you have SMART goals. You know, I know you're big into goals. Yes, you have the SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. You know, set specific goals, and hopefully you set them according to your values. You don't mess up too much. Set a lot of goals of lower values. You know, the chance for failure is obviously a bit higher than if you actually do it according to your true highest authentic values. So, but NLP is huge, and like I said, it's big part of it is knowing how to reach the subconscious mind with Milton Erickson's hypno language. So yeah, so it's big.
Okay. Well, the thing I've learned, I think, is that in the perspective that you shared, the self as a construct is a hypnotic state, basically. And it's interesting to me because I hadn't thought about it before like that. In the clinic that you operate in Norway, you've developed what you just referred to earlier in the interview as the so-called Nicolaysen method. So can you say something about that method and perhaps give an example of how it works?
Yeah, so it basically it started as a personal training clinic back in the day. And then, like I said, it went into neuromuscular therapy, and I included the nutrition with that. Then, as I did the check education and the NLP and all the other stuff, it just evolved. So now it's more mental, emotional, and spiritual. And I do what's called psychoeducation. So basically, it's educating people of how to actually, seems a little bit strange, but how to actually think, how help them how to think and how to manage their emotions. Because a lot of people, they actually don't know, like, is it the feelings that comes first? Is it the thoughts? Is it like, is it the way that is it my behavior? Like, they don't understand themselves. So it's actually how to help. So I call it psychoeducation, how to actually help them. And it, up until 7 years ago, it was very much holistic. It was everything from rehab to I did food testing. I did everything basically. So like I said, a lot of chronic fatigue, a lot of chronic pain, and I still do that. But again, the past 6, 7 years, I've been focusing more on basically this stuff that we've been talking about. I put it like this: I help you to take you from where you are to where you want to be, and hopefully far beyond. Hopefully. So I love to help people to basically wake up and grow up. That's what that's my highest value in life. I love that. And obviously I have a long way to go myself, but I love to at least help people to, get at least up to where I am and to what I've learned. And hopefully, as I keep on growing and waking up more and more and more, I will help other people to do the same. So yeah, so that's my mission. That's my mission in life.
Yeah, nice. And I think that is also the archetypal position of the educator, is to help people at least up to the level that you're operating from, and then preferably beyond, where indeed the student becomes the master, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you very briefly say what neuromuscular therapy is, so just for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah. So basically, neuromuscular therapy, it's just one school in Norway, and you can say it is deep tissue massage and working with also the autonomic nervous system. So basically, it's massaging the right way, in the right tempo, the right technique, but it's also trigger point therapy. It has something called vein pump massage, which is very much like, have you heard about ART? It's a chiropractor in the USA. It's active release technique. Yeah. So it includes that also, and also you have, like I said, you have neuromuscular acupuncture, which is not the Chinese or the Asian model, but it's actually just trigger point therapy using needles. So yeah, I did that for many years. I still do it. But like I said, not to the same extent as I did a few years ago.
All right. So moving on from your clinic and personal development, more to your activities as a podcast host. So for your Two Vikings podcast, which you host together with your friend and colleague, Frank Nilsen.
Yep.
You've interviewed a wide variety of guests, and they range from people like Sean Conway, who's an ultra athlete who cycled, swam, and ran 15 hours a day for 105 days in a row, which is mind-boggling. And so ranging from a person like that also to a person like Thomas Curran, who is a psychology professor researching the phenomenon of perfectionism. And what I wanted to ask you is, what are the top 3 things that you've learned from all of the podcasts you've done so far?
Yeah, great question. Great question. Well, first of all, I've learned that I really love doing podcasts. It's, again, one of my absolutely, if not the top value, is to learn. Like, I love to teach, I love to coach, I love but it is to, which is, like I said, my mission is to help people grow and wake up. But the learning aspect probably trumps everything. I just love to learn, and yeah, so that's probably the first thing. Now, when it comes to, it's very strange because, and I do not, I'm a little bit hesitated about actually saying this, but I will be honest. So, again, a huge part of NLP is doing what's called modeling. So you basically you break down a pattern of what a person does, so you can learn how to do it and implement it in your own life. That's what Bandler and Grinder did. Like I said, with Virginia Satir, Fritz Perls, they understood what they actually did, and they didn't even understand it themselves. But Bandler and Grinder, they understood it, so they could make NLP out of it. Anyway, and I've understood that most people that are really, really good at something that they do not have a clue how they they're actually able to do it. It's just, it seems like it's just skills and capabilities that's almost like on a subconscious level. And Frank and I, we love obviously to try to model. So we really ask, like, oh, how do you do this? Like, is it the thoughts? Is it the behavior? Do you work with the environment? Like, what is it? How do you prep for these things? And a lot of, like I said, most people do not have a clue. Most people are hung up in environment, prepping environment, and maybe behavior. But when it comes to feelings and thoughts, and yeah, so that's very interesting. Very, very interesting that most people do not have a single idea of how they actually do something. So again, I just got to say, obviously that makes modeling, NLP modeling, even more interesting to actually try to break it down so one can be able to do it oneself. And I would say the third thing that I've learned, yeah, I think, what would that be? What would that? Yeah, yes. Obviously, it's almost the same as the first thing, but it's how much I just love to be able, and just how thankful I am, how much gratitude I feel for being so lucky to be able to actually read a book and contact a person, and they're like, yeah, sure, I'll do a podcast with you. Like, and I know it's a little bit silly, to having that attitude of gratitude and count your blessings, but I truly feel that the more gratitude that you feel, like really counting your blessings and not taking anything for granted, but actually just feeling gratitude, that's life-changing in itself. It really is. It's like one of the pillars to having a great, I would say, a great life, at least from my own subjective experience. So I'm super grateful. Like I'm super grateful for doing the podcast with you, for having you on our podcast, to just like, yeah, I love this. I love this. So I have a heart filled with gratitude.
Mm. That is, I think, very valuable and not at all silly or strange. I think there's a Roman orator called Marcus Tullius Cicero, and he said that gratitude is the parent virtue. So basically the overarching virtue, so that all of the other virtues are basically less important than the apex virtue of gratitude. So that tells us something, I think, about how at least people who thought about virtues much of their time thought about gratitude.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it resonates with me for sure.
Yes, and speaking about your podcast, indeed, some of your podcast guests, they share what we could perhaps call controversial perspectives on reality. So can you perhaps say something about your own interest in unusual and sometimes controversial perspectives and opinions?
Yeah. Yeah, so I've always had a very, very curious mind. I love everything from very logical, academic, rational way of thinking. Like I love that, but I also love a good conspiracy theory. just just because it's mind expanding, isn't it? It's just it's fun. It's fun to just like, well, what if that is actually if that is the case, and we've spoken to like everyone from like CIA agents to, and we have a couple of people who's written books uh, that's about the whole hippie culture being basically a CIA uh, operation from the very start. Like everything was planned, nothing was a coincidence. And I'm just like, I think stuff like that is funny. I really love listening to people like that. Um, so that's basically it. It's like if I can shift I probably the best answer is like if I can do something that has the ability, or if I can listen to someone, or if I can read a book that has the ability to shift my perspective, my view of reality. And if I can just take like a small golden nugget, something that can make my life a little bit better for my own sake and also for other people's sake, a little bit more adventurous. Yeah, I just love that.
Well, that's very interesting to me. And also the fact that you're looking for the nuggets in what could be potentially inaccurate perspectives on reality, but nonetheless, you're open to exploring them and to seeing what can bring you some level of either learning or perhaps even entertainment or growth. So I think because it's, of course, nowadays there are so many disparate views and perspectives in the world, especially politically, and it seems that it's very difficult for groups of people with different views on reality to bridge the gap between them.
Very.
And I think that your approach in being willing to hear everyone, even though their views might be, how can we put it charitably, that they might be somewhat ludicrous in some cases.
Absolutely.
But nonetheless to engage with people, and I do feel that is a healthy impulse. So you might know, of course, of Daryl Davis, who is this musician who a black musician, which is relevant because he goes into dialogues with Ku Klux Klan members and then basically gets them to see him as a person and to inhabit his perspective, and then to basically hang up their Klan robes.
Yeah.
And the the reason he does it, or the way that he does it, is also engaging perspectives which he could easily say that's a stupid perspective and it's not worth engaging with. But because he engages, he gets people to broaden their horizon and to really go through a significant change. And I feel that's a very compassionate approach. And so I think what you're describing is also very similar in that way.
Yeah, and I love that example. And I must say, if I'm gonna like see this in 6 months, 9 months, a year, what I would love to do is to actually have, let's say, someone that is very much in the left direction when it comes to the financial system, and another one who's in the total opposite, very, and have them actually in or at the same podcast, actually discussing, like, and having us, Frank and I, more as an what would the word be? Moderator. Yeah, yeah. So that's basically what I would love to do. Again, not to repeat myself, I think it's interesting. I think it's funny. Maybe, like I said, maybe I can pick something up here and there. But I must also say, though, that it is a bit scary how many people that are so dogmatic, very polarized in their opinions, basically, in a way, what you already said. Like and it's yeah, so they are very, a few of them have been very, very polarized, very like, this is the truth, like there are no other truths, and it's going either straight to hell, or it's like, it's so. But again, I'm like, how can we possibly have a positive influence? How can we actually raise, for lack of a better terminology, it sounds very cliche, but how can we possibly help raising the awareness or consciousness even, could we possibly help? Well, then it's well worth it. It's well worth it then. So, and the last question that we asked you.
Yeah, we'll get to that now, because indeed the question apparently that Frank and you typically ask all of the guests at the end of the interview is what their perspective is on good and evil. So that, of course, I wanted to ask you what your own view is on the theme of good and evil.
Yeah. And it's such a hard question. It's again, it seems like a lot of people are, I would say, very much into the literal point that there is actually a physical God, and almost like a all evil devil on the other side. And that's it. That is actually a war on earth now, good versus evil. Personally, I do not have that belief. I believe that the world is a world of duality. You got to have opposites to be able to experience life. Call it whatever you want. Yin and yang, catabolism, anabolism. We know that even from the human physiology, right? Autonomic nervous system, anabolic, catabolic. We know that all the way down from like cells to molecules to, it's plus and minuses. It's build and destroy. Now, and I can actually link this to the first or the second subject today. And that is, if someone is actually supporting your highest values, what you're trying to build up, what you love, what you cherish, if someone supports those values, you will label them as good people. Now, if someone challenges those values, challenges your top 1, 2, or 3 top values, maybe even try very literally to tear those values down, you will probably label them as bad or maybe even evil people. Now, this is obviously ethics and morals. This is we are putting the meaning into that. We are labeling this good or that bad. Again, I say obviously, this is my subjective opinion. So I think that life is basically, in a way, neutral. Life happens. And again, if someone challenges our values, most people will label it bad. If someone supports it, we will label it very good or positive. And yeah, I just think that we are basically, again, we are very black, and a lot of people are very black and white. They do not see the perceived positive benefits in the all negative situation. And again, they do not see the perceived negative in the perceived all positive situation. And the more we are black or white, the more reactive we are, and the more wars and suffering we will experience. So that basically comes back to what we've been talking about. Find the positives in the perceived negatives and find the negatives in the perceived positives, and you will be a lot more gray instead of black and white.
Wonderful. So, Stian, how can people get in touch with you if they wish to work with you around values, mindset, and achievement?
So they can actually contact me on Instagram. So that's Stian Nicolaysen, Nicolaysen with a C, Nico. And Stian Nicolaysen on Facebook, or just go into my clinic, nicolaysen.no.
Well, wonderful. So thanks for a lovely interview. And it's been very interesting to hear you speak about your own perspectives, your life journey, and the method that you've developed. And also to hear how it's related to integral theory and how you have dedicated your life basically to helping others in a way that you were able to help yourself.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and I, back to my highest value. I hope that this was of benefit to the listener, and just feel free to contact me. And yes, thank you so much for being a great host, Lee.
Well, thanks, Stian. Lovely to have you on.
Thank you.